Hello. In this video, I'm going to take a look at graphing trig functions without a calculator. And so this is a bit challenging, and I am going to probably test you on this to some extent, but probably not the most complex examples. So just to kind of let you know where we're at with it. As we've talked in the previous video, you can see the amplitude is 1/2. The horizontal phase shift is going to be left pi over 2. And the period, since there's no b here, b is 1. The period is just 2 pi. Now, I find it's really most useful to kind of, so much going on is to kind of think about kind of one piece at a time. So first of all, you want to have a good idea in your head of what the regular sine looks like. And so hopefully you're fairly comfortable that one period is 2 pi, and that sine starts at 0, goes to 1, 0, and -1. And so this is what sine typically looks like. All right, so with amplitude of 1/2, instead of going up to 1 and down to -1, we're only going to go up and down to 1/2. And so that's really going to limit how much of this we see. I'm actually going to do a little dotted line here at 1/2. And a little dotted line at -1/2. And that just helps me see that, okay, wherever my sine curve is at, I'm not even going to do that, sorry. It's got to be between those. So my center line of my function is there. Now, my period's 2 pi, but it shifted left pi over 2. And so I'm going to make a little box here. Left pi over 2. So instead of going from 0 to 2 pi, it's now going to go from pi over 2 over to 3 pi over 2. Now, the trick from here is to cut that space in half, and then each of those spaces in half from there. Okay, and why I say that is now we're just going to, just like I made this little graph here, we're going to do the same thing in this little rectangle. Do you see the rectangle? So here we go. I'm going to graph, and maybe I'll do it in blue. I normally would start at 0, 0, but since it's been shifted left, I'm going to start here at 0 pi over 2. And then I'm going to go up. Instead of going up to 1 like I normally would, I'm going to go up to 1/2, back to 0, down to 1/2, and back to 0. And so here is one curve, or one period, of my sine function for this problem. And so let me do a quick review. Amplitude's 1/2, so that cuts it here and here. Period's 2 pi and moved left pi over 2, so that left pi over 2 and then 2 pi. All right, let's take a look at the next one. It's already finished. Amplitude of 1. Period is a horizontal, well, b is 2, so that's going to be a horizontal shrink by 1/2. So that's pi, or if you use your formula, it's 2 pi over 2. Vertical phase shift up, or the vertical shift up 2, horizontal phase shift 0. So if you wanted to, you could put in up 2. You see that's up 2. My amplitude's 1. Up 1, down 1. And then from pi. And you can see my period's pi. So it's 0, up 1, 0, down 1, up 1. I hope you know what I mean when I say 0. I really just mean the midline. And so that's the second equation. Third equation here, you can see this negative sign is going to be a reflection, amplitude of 1. Period, there's no b here, so the period is 2 pi. Vertical shift of down 1, and phase shift right pi over 2. And so I really need to start, with this vertical shift because everything's going to build off of that. So I'm going down 1. So instead of my function centering on the x-axis, it's going to be down 1. My amplitude is 1, so from there I'm going to go up 1 and I'm going to go down 1. So my cosine function will be in that range. Next, I really want to take care of, so maybe I'll do this as 2. Next, I want to take care of my phase shift. It's going right, pi over 2. I need to know where that's going to be so I know where my period is. My period is 2 pi, so now I can include that. So it's really going from pi over 2 to 5 pi over 2, which is going to be over here. And then last, I'm going to take into account my reflection and my cosine. So cosine normally starts at 1 and then goes down and back up. So here it's going to be a reflection of that. It's going to start down here and go up. So this is negative cosine of x. So for our graph, we've already got our little rectangle here. I just need to cut it in half. Cut it in half again on each side. That gives me my 4 points. I'm going to start at the bottom, go up, 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 or back down. And so this is going to be reflected, and you can see my curve here. Now, if you want, you can draw in another period. It's going to start the same way. You can either work backwards from the right, or you can think from the left. It doesn't matter. Go up, back down. And so that sine curve just keeps going. Sorry, in this case, cosine curve. All right, let's take a look at the next one. This one's done. Here the amplitude was 2. Period was still just 2 pi. Vertical shift down 1 and phase shift right pi. And so you can see there's kind of an intermediate step here. I kind of like doing the box. The student who did this for me took care of everything else and then did the period last. Doesn't matter too much. So I'll just go through it a little bit closer. Since the vertical shift is down 1, you can see here is the new center line, so to speak. From there, my amplitude is 2. So I go up 2 from there, and I go down 2 from there. Phase shift right pi. And so instead of starting at 0, it's going to start at pi. Now, you could draw this a period of 2 pi coming out here to 3 pi, but since we don't have room out here, I can just do my period starting back here, 2 pi this direction. So in my box then, I just need to cut my box in half here, here half again, and that's going to give me my points so that I can draw my cosine. Cosine starts and looks something like this. So you get a point here at the first quarter, halfway, 3/4, and all the way through. So here is my curve for this cosine function. All right, take a look at this one. Here we have amplitude of 3. Period is a half. Sorry, b is half, so that's a vertical stretch by a factor of 2, which gives me the 4 pi. Or you can use the formula 2 pi over b, which gives you 4 pi for your period. And so here, let's go ahead and sketch this. No vertical shift, so my amplitude's 3, so it's going to go up and down 3. My period is 4 pi. So you could go from 0 to 4 pi. But since I don't have room, I'm actually going to go from 2 pi to negative 2 pi. But I'm going to have to think this through a little bit. Normally, cosine would start at 1. And so here, instead of starting at 1, I'm going to start at 3. Okay? And so if I look at cutting this in half and in quarters, you can see this is already my half. This then would be my quarter. So half each way. And now I'm just going to go ahead. If this is my cosine, normally I would go down to the midline and then to -1, in this case -3. And I would keep going, right? But I'm just going to work my way backwards, put a point here and a point here. And so we can see that the cosine curve will look something like this. All right, and the last one, for some reason, I decided to do a different function. So really, this is more advanced than you're going to ever have to worry about. I think that's why I changed it. You can see here the information's kind of all written. The negative flip, 2 is going to be twice as big up and down. Going to go down 3, the 1/2, a vertical stretch of 2, or you can use the formula here to think of 4 pi. And so just putting those all together, you can see this shifted down 1, 2, 3. You can see an amplitude of 2, up 2, down 2. And then period of 4 pi. Again, normally that would be 0 to 4 pi, but we don't have room for that, so I'm just putting it here. And this is the cosine curve. So normally we would start at 1, right? But since it's flipped, we're going to start down here at -1, or really, I know that's not the value here. The value is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -5. But you understand what I'm saying. It starts at the bottom. I forgot to make my halves and quarter of my rectangle. So I'm going to cut my rectangle in half and then in quarters. And that's going to give me the points I need for my function. So start at the bottom. I would go to my midline and then up, go to the midline and up. And so we see here that this is going to be the cosine curve. All right, if you have any questions, feel free to go back and watch the video and email me or